I had a conversation recently that ended up having so much effect on me that it keeps returning to me. Um, so tonight I'm going to deviate a little bit from what I've been doing recently, and I'm actually going to read an editorial so that there's an audio of it that other people have an opportunity to hear. As part of my work with Exit Strata, I get to do a lot of interviews with artists and people involved in the arts and people who especially are creating collectives. And this is a story about one of those collectives I came into contact with. The article originally was called Awesome Creators Openings Thriving at the Limen of Creativity and Transcendence, and it's from September 4th. Limen. Noun, plural, limens or limina. 1. The threshold of a physiological or psychological response. 2. The external opening of a canal, an entrance. Liminal. Adjective. I consider it a really good sign that my gut impulse on starting to write up this introduction to openings is to begin with the word wow. As in, wow, these were some of the most satisfying interviews I've ever conducted. As in, wow, how lucky to have become engaged in such essential, critical, intelligent, even-handed dialogue with such kind and talented people around such an incredibly essential and often skirted topic for the creative community. As in, wow, this presents an unprecedented opportunity to explore this conversation further. What a blessing. I say blessing only semi-jokingly, as our Awesome Creators series welcomes openings, an artist collective begun at the behest of the Paulist Fathers, which is run out of and exhibits at St. Paul the Apostle in Midtown Manhattan. It's a collective whose mission statement is a deceptively simple, quote, artists exploring the connections between creativity and transcendence, end quote. There's that wow again. It could not have come at a better time, as since returning from Naropa, I've been stalling on framing the mindfulness lessons of Dharma arts for my community. Part of a belief that if Exit Strata and I are going to continue providing tools for artists to truly thrive and life hack their way into a new paradigm, it's going to be necessary to address this question. So I'm thrilled that it's happening this way. Rewind. The painter, my friend Georgia Elrod, had mentioned this unusual marriage to me some time ago, but it had faded from my memory until another Exit Strata community member, the writer Julian Gallo, noted online that his cousin, Steve Palermo, was going to be taking part in the upcoming show at Openings, Frenzy into Folly. It didn't take long for another of those rhizomatic bridges to be built. After exploring the mission and work of this collective, it became immediately clear that their goals in generating dialogue and empowering artists from a range of disciplines were very close to my own. I reached out to Father Frank Sebata, who generously agreed to take the time out to meet with me, as did Frenzy into Folly's curators and Openings members, photographer Kina Gonzalez and painter Michael Berube. It was the first of many good signs that they shared my enthusiasm in developing this relationship, something our meetings would confirm beyond a doubt. Frank Sebata will introduce himself to you as an artist first and a Catholic father later, knowing all too well the baggage attached to his professional title. He provided me with some fascinating background about the history of the Paulist Fathers, a sect of Catholicism founded by Isaac Thomas Hecker, born 1819, a transcendentalist in the mold of Thoreau and Emerson, who at one time was involved in the failed utopian community Fruitlands, which was co-founded by Amos Alcott, Louisa May Alcott's father. That's the writer of Little Women. Suffice it to say, both the history and contemporary workings of this open-minded, non-judgmental humanitarian tradition, long overshadowed by papal norms, which clearly was the case of not a little consternation for this kind and open man, is worth more inquiry, which I encourage you to do if you're intrigued. I was eager to ask Father Frank, whose job is, by the way, entirely devoted to the Paulist mission to support the arts, the hows and whys of openings, which he founded in 2006, and more about the, quote, creativity and transcendence question the collective seeks to address. What followed was the story of how his agenda to support artists and grow the program had taught him more than he ever could have dreamed, as he explained with great humility and enormous respect that via these conversations he has come to believe more than ever that artists possess a social consciousness that is not only useful, but which in fact contains the most essential teachings for our contemporary world. But it goes farther than that. When you first visit his website, where you'll begin to scratch the surface of his own intricate, extraordinary embroidered paintings, you'll note perhaps the quote from Francis Bacon, that the job of the artist is to deepen the mystery. In his reflections, also on the webpage, he begins to get to his true conviction that, quote, art is the outcome of a spirit engaged, connected to spirit, end quote. Are you there yet? As I sat with Frank, he described art as a conversation that never ends, and described his relationship to the artists in his community as one in which he was the constant recipient of great gifts. He described the work of openings as one in which artists were encouraged to recognize their true and immense value, using the parable of the Samaritan woman at the well as a backdrop to the lesson that everyone has a great gift to give, and that sometimes it is in the asking to receive that both recipient and giver recognize the extent of that value. Can I say wow again yet? It was important to Frank that I understand that the conversation's openings was encouraging were not, in fact, about God, and that in many ways that spirituality was not directly addressed in the creativity and transcendence dialogues. On the one hand, he noted that the space itself was parable, saying, never underestimate the power of context, but he also rightly explained how the process of engaging with him and with the church, even subconsciously with this mission in mind, was an experience via which one looked at oneself and others in a new way, and was one that was designed to take you out of yourself, recognizing your creative act as, in many ways, the transmission of something larger than yourself. And crucially, for the first time in my life, I had a Christian priest acknowledge that the standard use of the word God was delimiting. Not only that when human beings talk about and define God, that our spirituality becomes confined and domesticated, a situation worth avoiding with great care. Frank quoted from St. Anselm's ontological argument, noting that when we use the word God as per modern Christianity, we are no longer talking about God at all. He uses the word spirit and spoke with no judgment about all religions' search for the same thing. He has no interest in conversion, and his role is not that of a missionary by any means. With every fiber of his being, it is clear, here is someone who believes that there is a reason why, as he says, dictators get rid of artists first, because they hold the key to truly understanding the ineffable. From his reflections, any artist will tell you that at some point while working, they lose consciousness of time and their surroundings. They enter time out of time, liminal space. Is not a high in that it is not an easy or relaxed time. It is creative space. Colors, shapes, ideas that were not connected before are being connected. Artists will tell you they hear an inner voice guiding them. They can tell the difference between this voice and a need to finish the piece, or worse, by thoughts of how they can make it appeal to others. Entering this liminal space demands that the artist listen to her soul. It is deep listening, and deep listening is prayer. If we can get over our conditioned reactions to the word God, Spirit, and prayer, what we're left with is, this is a man who believes that creative work is the most essential work we can do with our lives, and that in that work we are able to access the highest possibilities in ourselves. This is evolved ministry if I've ever seen it. No, wait, I've never seen it before, but now I have. I cried a little when I get home. I'm not going to lie. Anyway, the article goes on to talk a little more about the specific show that came up there, which is amazing. But it also goes on to sort of talk about how the etymology of the word inspiration, which is the immediate influence of God or a god, from around 1300. And that, in fact, it came from the words in and sperare, which is to breathe. Literally the act of inhaling, the inhaling of inspiration. So I found myself thinking about this a lot in the last week or so, and finding that in my desire to help others that I so often have been drawn to teach, and I do find myself in a teaching space, but the thought that in fact it was in the act of creating that we would make a new model, that you would be able to find and create a new world, is something that I found myself thinking about. And I'm going to read a couple of quotes from things that I wrote this week and thinking about it. The first is, these are marks and shapes and sounds that I make to see if I can create the world I sense anew. It is my way of knowing by asking, by using the tools I have to try to rephrase my perceptions, to see if you and I can know each other better with this world I made, and not with this first one, this one I'm in and yet sense as having its own mind that I cannot comprehend. I make so that I may know not the world, but my world, so that I can admit to myself again and again that my knowing is constantly new. If holding on to some of the shades or angles I might have seen some years ago. Yes. So anyway, that goes on to talk about that basically it's the idea of what one is doing when one first decides to reproduce something that one sees, and how you are actually creating, you're making something new for the very first time, and that act of creation is something entirely unique to not only humans but to you. Today, in trying to think about how I could help others, I sort of received, transmission, which sometimes I feel like I receive from something guiding me, which suggested that instead of trying to help, that I continue to be a lighthouse or beacon. Do not overwhelm others with information. That information, or, text, reads like something to be understood with logic, when in fact it must begin with the nonverbal acknowledgement of the soul. Only then can the rest of the words convey the ancient information, or be allowed into the perceptual field of a neural system that is still coded for human learned behavior and the commonly vetted limits of that system. What I received is that in helping, that the most important thing is to continue to transcend the confusions of what we immediately perceive with art. That through the act of making, we represent this world so that others may also have a chance to transcend via our representations. And that we, therefore, by transmuting the world that we have into a new creation, which might affect others in a way that allows them to transcend, that we allow them to re-perceive and represent on their own. And that's all for today. Please make things. You are an awesome creator.